If you've been podcasting for a while, you've definitely had one experience, and that's the moment where you go, is this even worth it? And so today, I want to address that. I want to talk about why podcasting makes sense. And honestly, we're going to spend a little time talking about why it might not make sense for you right now, because it can be a great idea and just not be the right idea right now. It might be time to hit pause and figure some things out. Let's look at it though. Here we go. Welcome to the More Profitable Podcast with Stacey Harris. I'm Stacey, and this is the spot to learn more about the strategies, tactics, and tools you need to build your more profitable podcast. My team and I work every day with podcasters like you to shift shows from frustrating time sucks to productive members of your sales team, because your show should be built to generate and convert leads. So let's get into it. Let's get into it. I'm stoked because I think that too often we, especially this time of year, get inundated with all of the things we should do, all of the things that are just going to be surefire buttons to success in the new year. And often they're nonsense, but sometimes they're true. And most often I think that they're a yes and a but and I don't know, but not necessarily giving us all the nuance of whether it's a good idea or not a good idea. And so I want to talk specifically about podcasting because I see these a lot, spending time in the corners of the internet I spend time in, where podcasting is the only way to get traction, and you need to be doing this, that, and the other thing. And I'd even extend this to video podcasting. If you're somebody who's had your show for a while and you're like, well, should I be doing video? Everything we're going to talk about today is the same. All of the benefits of it are there, and there's some reasons why it might not be right now. And I'm going to say this over and over again. There is a right now to this. It doesn't mean always. It doesn't mean forever. It means it's not the best solution for me in this moment. And I decide when I want to revisit this. And so, these are some of the things we look at quarterly. When I'm wrestling with something I want to do or add or change, I'm always looking at, cool, not this quarter. Maybe next quarter? Nope, not next quarter either. Cool, then we put it in the future. Yes, this quarter. Yes, this quarter. No, this quarter. What about next quarter? Yeah, next quarter. Like, there are all sorts of places for this to fit in. So I want to talk through some ways, some factors in making that decision. Before we hop into that, I want to remind you right now, there are spots open for podcast strategy intensives. If this conversation that we're going to have today is resonating with you, if these are things you're wrestling with, if you go through this and you're like, yes, this is the thing I want to do, and I need to be doing it differently. Because by the way, that's also an option when we talk about this why or why not. These calls, these intensives with me are a really solid way to course correct your show, to plan out your show however you want to use them to get the support you need now. We do an audit, we go through things, we build a content calendar for 12 weeks, and we start outlining those episodes on the call. So all you need to do to implement is actually record and release them. But now's a good time to book them. They are open now. Head over to uncommonlymore.com/intensive and you can reserve your spot. I look forward to hanging out with you. Those intensives are a really, really good time. I love them. Let's dig into it. Let's talk about why podcasting. Before we get into that, I want to define some things around the kind of show you have, because we're having a nuanced conversation today, because this is not a yes for everybody, no for everybody kind of conversation. We're introducing nuance. So this is the nuance I want to layer in there. And that's the kinds of shows I'm talking about, because the way I see it, the way I look at it, there are two kinds of show. And I call them B2C and B2B, although that's not a real definition, like the actual definition need not apply. So let me define this for you. When I think about a B2C show, I think about a show where the audience is essentially your product because you're generating revenue based on the audience quantity. So think about a show like Armchair Expert, or, if you're a Bachelor fan, you see those shows that are Bachelor recaps, or maybe, the cast of New Girl's got one now. I can't remember the name of it, but where they're doing like a rewatch series. I really loved the West Wing Weekly, which was a West Wing rewatch series. They're generating revenue based on sponsors sales, selling ads and bots. It's sort of a traditional media model, right? We see it on TV, we see it on streaming. We're going to provide you this content, and in exchange, we're going to borrow your attention for gaps in this content to sell you stuff. You are not our consumer. The ad companies are technically our consumer, our revenue source. Let's put it that way. That's our revenue source. Now, they may also generate revenue through like merch sales and converting their audience that way. And we're going to talk about a version of this in B2B. But generally, the bulk of the revenue is coming through like brand partnerships, sponsored content, that kind of model. Think about this like a YouTube influencer kind of model, right? That's what I think about when I think of B2C, the way I'm talking about it here. Again, not the actual definition. The other kinds of show I think about more as B2B shows. They're businesses where the business is the sponsor of the show. This show is a great example of that. Your show is likely also an example of this, where we're generating revenue based on audience quality. Growth for the sake of growth isn't really going to help us. And that's the big distinguishing factor for me. With B2C, we're generating revenue based on audience quantity. And with the B2B model, we're generating revenue based on audience quality, where size is not necessarily going to generate an equal result in revenue. What I want you to be thinking through as we're looking at this is the fact that your show is one of those shows where you're generating revenue based on audience quality. That's the kind of show we work with. That's the kind of show we're going to be talking about today. That's the kind of perspective we need to have when we're looking through, is this going to work for us? A great example of this is there's a YouTuber who I see from time to time who's a business owner and really, really niched their audience early and like had a very specific niche to their content, and they sold their services on the back end of that. And they have now evolved to being someone who generates a much wider variety of content. This person is creating much more, I'm going to call it influencer, content creator. We've seen, these kind of people popping up a lot on TikTok where they're generating revenue off views. They're generating revenue off of brand partnerships. So your show could evolve, but the goal of your show and some of the decisions you're going to make are going to be different depending on which place you fall into. So just keep in mind that nuance as we're looking to the benefits, because we're today going to really be speaking to the benefits and some of the things to look out for when you are ultimately following into like three goals: thought leadership growth, service sales growth, affiliate sales growth. That's what we're going to be talking about today, because this is when we're going to get into the benefit of podcasting, why podcasting works for this group of people. And I wanted to highlight that nuance because, again, and I'm going to keep hammering this home because it's so unbelievably important. You've got to be looking at, when you're consuming this content, when you're on TikTok, when you're on Instagram, when you're Googling things, when you're in Facebook groups, leave the Facebook groups. When you're in these places and you're seeing these overarching this is the only way to get sales. This is the only way to build your business. This is the only way to get traction on social media, is this specific thing. I want you to run it through the filter of what is my end goal and how is it different than theirs? Because do you want to know who I see most frequently talking about how much they're succeeding on TikTok and how TikTok is the only way and it's got to be a TikTok first strategy? They sell TikTok services. Their content is about TikTok trends. I see this in the podcasting space too. There's people in the podcasting space who are telling you podcasting is the only way to generate revenue. It's the only way to grow your audience. It's the only way to build a bigger platform and take your business to the next level or take your personal brand to the next level. And that's because that's what they're selling you. And spoiler alert, it's what I'm selling you too, but I want to sell it to you if it's the right fit for you right now. Because if it's not the right fit for you right now, it's not going to work. It's not, because you're not in the right place. And so let's talk about some of these benefits and then we'll shift into some red flags for why now might not be the right time. If as you look ahead in your sort of short-term, medium-term goals, booking speaking gigs, selling books or planners or other kind of like merch, I'm going to call it. If those are things that you want to be doing under your own IP, you want to be packaging and selling your IP, podcast is going to help you do it because it's going to help you essentially build yourself a stage between speaking engagements. Who can I sell to when I'm not on a stage if I'm a speaker? Nobody. But I can if I build my own stage. And I leverage that stage to get me on more stages because now these people booking speakers, event planners, companies, whatever, booking trainers, whatever, they can see me in action. For these people booking podcast guests or media experts, they can hear me presenting content. They can hear me delivering this message. This is a preview of what you too can have at your next event. Don't say that. But this is absolutely the way to do that. Because by generating your IP in this form, you're going to be able to do lots of things. Literally turn transcripts into the start of your book. We have clients who that was the primary goal of creating their podcast, was they knew after we created 12 or 18 months of content, they'd be able to put together a book, a workbook, and package it and go into companies and train on it. That was the purpose of the show. And in the meantime, it helped build their audience. It helped generate speaking engagement bookings. It helped book training bookings because they went into companies and delivered service, like coaching and consulting. It helped with all of those things. Thought leadership is, if that's your goal, this is absolutely a way to do that. If selling your services is something you want to do through your podcast, it's absolutely possible. It's a great reason to podcast. It's going to help you nurture and convert leads. That's what we do with this show. That's what this show is built to do. It's what this show does. We haven't signed a client in 2 years that doesn't listen to the What Working with Uncommonly More podcast looks like before they sign their contract. Frequently before they get on the sales calls. And guess what my sales calls are like now? I just want to make sure it's the right time. I just want to do a gut check and make sure you're the same person you are on the podcast. I have no problem with that. Let's do it. I want to get to know you too, because this has got to be a good fit. We're going to be in this for at least a year. You and me, bud. And the team. But mostly you hang out with me. And so I want to make sure we get along. So the sales call is no longer a sales call. The sales call is let's make sure we jive and away we go. That's a lot more fun. But that can happen because my podcast is built to do that. And so if that's a result you want, that can be something that happens with podcasts. The third sort of goal that I see in these kinds of shows, the other benefit to podcasting for this B2B, we're calling it, model, affiliate sales. If you're somebody who is a connector, you're somebody who has an incredible network of incredible experts, and you want to build a part of your revenue that is connecting people who trust you with people you trust, affiliate sales. It allows you to build relationships, bring people on the show, talk to them, get to know them, highlight their offer for your audience. It allows you to feature your already trusted brands. Notice that these three goals all sort of sit in the same type. It's ultimately about putting the listener with a solution that serves them. In thought leadership, that's events, getting them in front of you on stage, or selling your IP through books and planners and merch. For service sales, it's delivering them that result in a done for you or done with you kind of way. Coaching, consulting, done for you services. Again, see this show. And the third one's affiliate sales. You're, again, oftentimes delivering them a done service, but you're, instead of delivering the service, you're connecting them with the person who's going to do the service. You're connecting them with the place they can get the thing. And so all of these are about moving a listener through a journey. And that is why we have to look at a more quality audience instead of a quantity audience, because they have to be the right fit for how you solve the problem. They have to have the problem. And I don't mean problem in the earth-shaking trauma sense. I mean the itch they want to scratch, right? The unmet need. The unmet desire. How about that? If these are your goals, for me, ultimately, the big reason to be looking at podcasting, the big reason I podcast, is it allows me to leverage our one-to-one relationship, the intimacy of you and me sitting in the car or walking the dog or hanging out in the office or whatever it is that you do when we hang out. It allows me to leverage this time you and I have together. I'm also having it with other people. I'm sorry, I know you thought it was just us. It is. It's just us. But seriously, it allows me to create this moment at scale with a lot of people. Ideally, a lot of the right people. And that's where that quality comes into play again, is I've got to be having those moments with the right person. This is starting to sound like a relationship thing. But, it's true. It's that's the biggest benefit, is I'm able to have more of these conversations. It changes the way you and I come together when we come together in person, because we haven't really been apart. We've just been together here instead of face-to-face on a Zoom call. That, for me, is the why in podcasting. Let's talk about why not, though. Because as beneficial as podcasting can be, there are some big reasons why right now might not be the right time. And the number one, I'm not even going to build up to it. The number one is a lack of clarity. If you're not sure where you're going to put people once they, get into it and they're like, yes, this is great. You're perfect. I definitely want help with this. And from you, you've got to know where they go into. If you're lacking clarity in your offer, you're not going to be able to achieve those thought leadership goals, those sales goals, or service sales goals, the affiliate sales goals. It's just not going to be possible, because you can't move forward with a lack of clarity around your offer or your audience. With that said, podcasting can help clarify that. You're just going to have a much, much longer road to payoff than if you come in clear. And you do have to have some start to the idea. coming in with a pretty solid idea of who you want to be helping and how you want to be helping them so that you can start testing audience and offer ideas. Great way to use a podcast. I would suggest DIYing your show or doing it very minimally, very like minimum viable product. I would give it a start and an end date. I really love this seasons for this. I'm going to produce 50 episodes. I'm going to produce 25 episodes. I'm going to produce 12 episodes, and we're going to explore an idea. It's got a beginning, a middle, and an end, and I know what I'm working towards. It can keep you out of frustration and burnout when you're doing a heavier lift because you're doing it on your own or you're doing it with very minimal support. And it'll help you start testing language, seeing what connects. It'll start maybe getting you to have some sales conversations. They may not convert. They might convert. But it will give you experience so that you can start saying, I like this or I don't like this, which is often just as important, honestly. And so that can be that lack of clarity, though. If you can't even think about what you'd want to test, now is not the time for a podcast. Now is the time to be sitting down and really clarifying your offers. Really getting clear on who it is you work with, how you serve them. And there are a legion of people to help you with that. Look for somebody who's going to go beyond they shop at Nordstrom and they're 27 years old. Got to dig deeper. There's much more nuance than that. Again, we're going at this very, very nuanced. But you've got to start there. The other big reason is ultimately capacity. And it folds down to time capacity and financial capacity. If right now you are so tip-top with client work and you're like, oh, but I want to be able to sell a program, and so I'm going to create a podcast so I can sell my program through that podcast and get out of some of this client work. That's going to be rough because it's going to be really hard for you to show up for a podcast launch. What I don't think we recognize frequently enough when we talk so flippantly about podcasting being the greatest thing since sliced bread is that a podcast launch is like any other launch. It doesn't matter that you're not getting paid. It doesn't matter that there's no money directly coming in as a result of, hitting publish on the podcast. It still is going to take an energetic push. You've got to prep episodes. You've got to be marketing the show. You're not ever going to get anybody to listen to that show if you do not tell people about it. I have been doing this 9 years. We are in our 10th year right now. No one listens unless you tell them to. No one books a call unless you tell them to. If you do not have the time capacity to be answering emails or delivering sales calls or checking your books or posting on Instagram or whatever marketing activities you're doing now, if you're currently wildly stuck in that loop of feast or famine because you have business and so you can't market, and then you don't market so you have no sales, and you're stuck in that loop, you've got to figure out how to get out of that loop first. Podcasting is not the way out of the loop. Changing how you market will not suddenly give you the time to market. You've got to figure out how to build systems in your business that streamline your workflow and your delivery. Then you can look at the ways you want to market. It's that simple. If financially you can't take on the cost of your hosting, the cost of an editor, or you don't have the time to edit, if you can't take on the cost of getting your transcripts done, of getting your show notes done, of getting everything posted, and or, pay the time to do the transcripts, do the show notes, get everything uploaded and scheduled, create the graphics, create the audiograms, create the marketing materials. That's going to, creating that, producing a show will cost you one of two things. And honestly, 100% of the time, it's a little bit of both. And you really just get to adjust the scale. More time or more money. More time or more money. Because absolutely zero podcasts only take one. There's nobody who can just pay and never have to spend any time. And there's nobody who can just spend time and never have to spend any money. It's going to cost both. And you just get to slide the scale towards one or the other. So if you don't have one and or both of those right now, now is not the right time for a podcast. It doesn't mean it won't ever be. It might be a month from now, or in the next quarter, or at the other end of the year, or this time next year. But it's not right now. Now, if you're listening to this and you are thinking about why these might not be the right time, and realizing that none of these are the reasons why you currently are thinking about stopping or not starting a podcast, then yeah, look at it. Look at what reasons do you currently feel you don't have the podcast? Because addressing those more specifically might help you get to the other side of it and or figure out, yeah, no, it's just not for me. Maybe for you, the idea of sitting alone and talking into a microphone sounds horrible. You're a writer. You want to write. Great, write. Maybe for you, you're going, yeah, I really like video. I really want to do video. Great, do a video version. Do a video podcast. Do just videos and short form video, whatever. Then do that. Because yes, there are lots of reasons to do this, and there are lots of reasons not to do this. But guess why I podcast? Because I don't love video and I don't love writing blogs. In this order, audio, video, writing. Those are my preferences. And so I didn't want to write blog posts anymore. So 9 years ago, I launched a podcast. And guess what? I went from very inconsistently being able to create content to I've done this show at least once a week with some small breaks here and there for 9 years. This is episode 586 of this show. We've been doing it a long time. And it's because this format works for me. Creating content in this way jives with my brain. So we do it. But I do it in a way that supports my goals, and I do it in a way that supports me being able to come back to it consistently. So if you're thinking, I agree, I love podcasting, I have the time, I have the financial means, I have the clarity, then you're just frustrated. Reconnect with why you podcast and get yourself some support. The podcast strategy intensives are a really good way to do that. If you're like, no, I want all of the support, great. Let's have a conversation about what taking production off your plate looks like. Let's talk about what having a strategic partner in this looks like and creates for you. We have been known to make shows more fun. It's most frequently the feedback we get after those first couple of months. It's like, I actually like my podcast again. It's like, oh, what happens when you don't have to do all the things? Head over to uncommonlymore.com/production and learn more about what production services look like with our team. All right? I will see you back here next week. Thanks. Thanks so much for listening to the show. Remember that content consumption does not make changes. So commit to doing something from today's episode. Maybe it's taking action on what we talked about. Maybe it's reaching out to me and learning more about podcast strategy intensives or what podcast production looks like with our team. All of that is over at uncommonlymore.com. And if you haven't yet signed up for the podcast newsroom, I want to remind you that is a great next step. If you're not really sure what comes next, hang out over there. get those exclusive private episodes. That's over at podcastnewsroom.com. And the last favor I will ask, because social proof is endlessly important for sure, is to leave a rating or review for the show. If you go to ratethispodcast.com/more, that's the easiest way to do it. But I would love to hear what you thought of the show, what you think of the show, and if the show has been helpful for you. I can't wait to chat with you. So this is just the start of the conversation. Reach out so we can keep it going. Talk soon.